Funny how life can flip on you when you least expect it. One minute you're thinking about wine pairings for a nice anniversary dinner, the next minute you're questioning everything you thought you knew. That's how it started for me. It was a Tuesday. Plain old, nothing special Tuesday. I had just clocked out at the shop, same as always. My back was aching, hands stained with grease from working on an old Chevy truck all afternoon. But my mind was elsewhere. Caitlin and I had our 10th anniversary coming up. 10 years. A whole decade. It felt like a milestone that deserved more than the usual flowers and takeout. So, on a whim, I decided to swing by the little wine shop she liked. The one with the pretentious name I could never pronounce right. I figured, get a nice bottle, maybe set the tone for a fancy dinner, show her I still had some romance left in me. That's when I saw her. Across the street, by the window of this cozy bistro, sat Caitlin. At first, I smiled to myself. Thought, what are the odds? Maybe she's meeting a friend. But then I saw him. Tall guy, probably mid-30s, sharp suit, that easy kind of confidence that makes you take notice. He was leaning in, elbows on the table, like the world beyond that little booth didn't exist. And Caitlin, she was smiling. Not the polite, forced kind you give a colleague. This was softer. Warmer. Familiar. Then she did it. She reached out, brushed his arm with her fingertips. It was subtle, barely a touch. But to me, it felt like a good punch. Because I knew that move. I'd seen it 100 times. It was her signature. The thing she did when she wanted to show she was invested in what you were saying. When she cared. And it wasn't for me. I sat there in my truck, engine idling, watching my wife share a moment that wasn't supposed to exist. I wanted to be rational. Logical. Maybe it was business. Maybe it was harmless. But there was this gnawing feeling in my chest that wouldn't let me off the hook. I should have gotten out. Walked up. Said hi. But I didn't. I froze. Just watched from a distance like some spineless voyeur. When she got home that night, everything was normal. Too normal. She breezed in, dropped her purse by the door, kissed me on the cheek. Hey babe. How was your day? I tried to keep my voice steady. Good. Saw you at that little bistro downtown. You meeting a friend? Her pause was microscopic, but it was there. A flicker. Then she smiled, all ease and charm. Oh yeah. Client from Houston. Total last-minute thing. You know how it is with these accounts. Hand-holding, small talk. The usual. I watched her carefully. The way she shrugged out of her blazer, slipped off her heels like she hadn't a care in the world. Her story flowed so smoothly I almost believed it myself. Almost. But I've been married to this woman for 10 years. You pick up on things. The way she avoided eye contact just a little too long. The slightly defensive tone masked by her usual cheer. It was all there, hiding in plain sight. Still, I nodded. Let her words settle in the air between us. What else could I do? Part of me wanted to believe her. Desperately. Because if I let myself think otherwise, if I pulled that thread, I knew the whole thing might unravel. And I wasn't sure I was ready for that. So I played along. We had dinner. Talked about her day, my day, the usual noise people fill silence with when they're trying to convince themselves everything's fine. But later that night, when she fell asleep beside me, her breathing soft and steady, I lay there staring at the ceiling, that image of her touching his arm replaying in my mind on an endless loop. I told myself it was nothing. A coincidence. A misunderstanding. But deep down, I think I already knew. That was the first crack. The moment when truth, stubborn and unwelcome, started to seep through the lies we told ourselves. And no matter how much I wanted to patch it up, pretend it was all in my head, the damage was done. Because once you see it, really see it, you can't unsee it. After that night, nothing really changed. Not outwardly. Caitlin still smiled the same, kissed me good morning, asked how my day was. But for me, everything felt different. Like a song just slightly off-key, you might not notice right away, but once you do, you can't stop hearing it. That bistro scene played on repeat in my head. Her leaning in, that soft touch on his arm. It wasn't scandalous. It wasn't blatant. But it was an asterisk made in a way that cut deeper than if I'd caught them locked in some cheap motel room. Because it was familiar. It was ours. And now it wasn't. I started noticing things I'd ignored before. For months, Caitlin had been taking more business trips. At first, it made sense. She's always been career-driven, always climbing the ladder. Those late-night strategy meetings, the conferences that popped up with barely a day's notice, I didn't question them. Why would I? She's ambitious. I admired that about her. But looking back, the dots started connecting in ways I didn't want them to. Like the trip to Austin last fall. She said it was a corporate retreat, team bonding, all that HR buzzword fluff. But when she came back, there was a coffee cup from a tiny cafe in San Antonio sitting in her car. A place she had no reason to be. When I asked, she laughed it off. Pit stop on the way back, she said. We got lost? Simple, innocent. But now, with fresh eyes, it didn't sit right. Then there was her phone. Always with her. Always face down. Notifications silenced. She used to be the type to toss it on the couch and forget about it for hours. Not anymore. Now it was an extension of her hand. A barrier. If it so much as buzzed, she'd check it, eyes flickering with an urgency that didn't match the casual tone of just work stuff. There was also the keychain. It sounds stupid, I know. A keychain shouldn't mean anything. But I found it in her purse one night when I was looking for her car keys. It was a cheap souvenir, one of those gaudy plastic ones you get from a tourist shop. From New Orleans. The thing is, we hadn't been to New Orleans in years. And she never mentioned going back. When I asked about it, her answer was almost too smooth. A client brought it back for me, she said, with that breezy smile. You know how they are, always trying to butter us up. Butter us up. It sounded right. Professional. Logical. But it didn't feel right. Bit by bit, these little moments piled up. Like grains of sand on a scale, slowly tipping the balance until you can't pretend it's even anymore. Even the way she smelled was different. Her perfume had always been subtle, warm, familiar. Lately, there was something new. Something sharper, more floral. I didn't think much of it at first, women switch scents all the time. But then I remembered her saying she hadn't bought new perfume in months. When I asked, she said it's a sample from a gift basket at work. Another small lie. Or maybe it wasn't. But in context? It felt loaded. It wasn't any one thing. Not a smoking G***N. But all these tiny details, things that once seemed so harmless, started fitting together in a way that painted an entirely different picture. And the worst part? I didn't want to believe it. Because admitting what was happening meant admitting my life wasn't what I thought it was. That the woman I loved, the woman I trusted, wasn't who I believed she was. So I kept it to myself. I didn't confront her. Didn't accuse. I just watched. And in watching, I noticed more. Like how her schedule never quite matched up. She'd tell me she had a dinner meeting, but the calendar invite she left open on her laptop said remote strategy session. Or how she'd come home from these long days at the office without so much as a laptop bag. Once or twice, I even noticed faint lipstick smudges on her teeth, lipstick she hadn't been wearing when she left the house. But still, I said nothing. Because saying something meant pulling that thread. And I wasn't sure I was ready for what would come undone. Instead, I started testing her. Little things. Asking about her day in more detail, seeing if her stories held up. They didn't always. She'd mix up timelines, forget who she was supposedly meeting with. Nothing damning, but enough to keep the suspicion alive. One evening, while she was in the shower, her phone lit up on the nightstand. Just a quick buzz. No name. Just an initial, E. That was new. Caitlin had never been secretive with her friends. If it was her best friend Rachel or someone from work, she'd usually tell me about it. But E? That was different. Unfamiliar. I didn't snoop. Not then. I convinced myself it was just paranoia. But that little E stayed lodged in my brain like a splinter. Every little thing added weight. And with every ounce I felt myself shifting. Growing more detached. More cautious. I started wondering how much of our life together had been real and how much had been a carefully maintained illusion. It wasn't just the big stuff, the trips, the meetings, the late nights. It was the way she'd smile at me, but her eyes wouldn't quite meet mine. The way her touch felt lighter, more absent-minded. Like muscle memory rather than genuine affection. I'd come home from work, kiss her cheek, ask about her day, and she'd give me answers that felt rehearsed. As if she was reading from a script. And maybe she was. Maybe we both were. One night, I found myself sitting alone in the garage, staring at the old photo we'd pinned above the workbench. It was from our honeymoon. Caitlin had this ridiculous straw hat on, oversized sunglasses, grinning ear to ear. Back then, her smile had reached her eyes. I looked at that photo for a long time, wondering when that smile had changed. Wondering if I'd missed the signs or if she'd just gotten better at hiding them. That's when it hit me, the truth wasn't going to announce itself. It wasn't going to come crashing through the door with flashing lights. No. It was going to keep slipping through in these small, almost invisible cracks. But cracks have a way of spreading. And the more I noticed, the harder it became to pretend they weren't there. Denial is a hell of a Dr*G. For weeks, I lived in this weird limbo, half awake, half asleep, clinging to the idea that maybe, just maybe, I was wrong. That the Caitlin I knew was still there, just buried under work stress, bad timing, maybe a little boredom. I told myself couples hit rough patches. I told myself I wasn't being fair. But deep down, I knew better. The illusion was hanging by a thread. And it finally snapped on a Thursday. It was nothing special. The day started off like any other. I went to the shop, knocked out an oil change, handled a brake job for a regular. On my way home, Caitlin texted me one of her usual updates. Late meeting tonight, babe. Don't wait up. Red heart. I should have felt reassured. Instead, it made my skin crawl. That little heart emoji used to mean something. Now it just felt like a bandage slapped over a bullet wound. When I got home, something was off. Subtle, but enough. Caitlin's fitness tracker was sitting on the kitchen counter. Now, you gotta understand, that thing was glued to her wrist. She joked before that it was more reliable than me when it came to keeping her on schedule. So why would she leave it behind? I don't even know what possessed me to pick it up. Maybe it was just habit. Maybe I'd reached the point where I was tired of not knowing. Either way, I tapped the screen, swiped through the menus, and there it was. Location data. Instead of showing her at the yoga studio like she said, the tracker pinged her location downtown. Specifically, a hotel. Not a fancy resort or a business suite. Just a mid-range, tucked-away hotel that screamed discretion. I stared at the screen for a long time, my thumb hovering over the refresh button like maybe it would change if I gave it a second. It didn't. Still, I told myself, maybe it's innocent. Maybe the meeting ran long and they moved to a quiet spot. Maybe. Always maybe. But then I found the roses. It was a stupid little detail, but it hit like a gut punch. A half-wilted bouquet stuffed in the kitchen trash. Roses. Fresh enough that the stems were still green. And tucked between the petals was a tiny card, barely hidden. It read, "Until next time. E." That was it. No flowery message. No declaration of love. Just that single line. Simple. Familiar. E. The same initial from her phone notifications. My hands were trembling as I set the card down. I felt sick. Not with rage, not yet, but with that hollow, sinking realization that no matter how much I wanted to deny it, the truth had been sitting right under my nose the entire time. Caitlin wasn't working late. She wasn't at the yoga studio. She was at a hotel, receiving roses from someone she called E. But if there was still a shred of doubt left, it didn't survive what I found next. Later that evening, I sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through our shared email account. Caitlin rarely used it anymore, but old habits die hard. Most of it was junk, newsletters, receipts, promotional nonsense. But buried in the spam folder was a ride-share receipt. Probably got flagged as junk by accident. It was from earlier that afternoon. The route was clear, downtown hotel to a flower shop. Timestamped. Paid with her card. That was it. That was my undeniable proof. I'd spent weeks, maybe months, trying to piece together fragments of suspicion. And now, with a simple tracker, a trashed bouquet, and a ride-share receipt, it all collapsed. The illusion was dead. But here's the thing, I didn't confront her. Not yet. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to see how far she'd go. Maybe I wanted her to hang herself with her own lies. Or maybe I just wasn't ready for the fallout. Once you light that match, there's no putting the fire out. So I stayed quiet. I watched as Caitlin came home later that night, breezing through the door like nothing was wrong. She tossed her keys into the bowl by the entryway, kicked off her heels, gave me that same tired smile. Long day, she sighed, dropping her purse onto the couch. Client from Houston was a nightmare. We had to regroup off-site. Off-site, right? I nodded, playing along. My heart was hammering in my chest, but my face stayed neutral. She poured herself a glass of wine, curled up on the couch, and started scrolling through her phone like this was just another Thursday. It was surreal. Our marriage had become a theater production. She was the actress, I was the audience, and every word out of her mouth was a rehearsed line. The scary part was how convincing she was. If I hadn't seen the tracker, the flowers, the receipt, hell, maybe I'd still be clinging to her script. But I wasn't. I was done pretending. That night, lying in bed beside her, I stared at the ceiling, listening to her breathe. Every rise and fall of her chest felt like a reminder of the lie she was living. And by extension, the lie I was now complicit in. It wasn't about the affair anymore. It was about the betrayal of trust. The manipulation. The quiet, methodical way she carved out this second life right under my nose. And the worst part? I couldn't even tell if she felt guilty. There were no signs of remorse. No restless nights. No sudden confessions. Just a steady stream of small deceptions crafted with surgical precision. I knew I had a choice to make. I could confront her. Explode. Demand answers she'd probably spin into more lies. Or I could keep observing. Collecting. Preparing. I chose the latter. Because if Caitlin wanted to play games, she was about to find out I'd learned the rules. It's a strange thing, realizing your home has become a stage. At first, it's subtle. You catch it in the way the light falls just right across the kitchen table where she sits, scrolling through her phone. The way she laughs at your jokes too quickly, too perfectly, like she's hitting her mark. Every gesture, every word, rehearsed. Practiced. And you're the audience. I remember sitting across from Caitlin one evening, a week after the incident, and just watching her. She was telling me about a new account she was managing. Her hands moved as she spoke, her eyes lit up at all the right moments. But I wasn't listening to the words anymore. I was listening to the rhythm of the lie. She didn't know I knew. That was my advantage now. And the longer I stayed quiet, the more I saw. The truth is, infidelity doesn't scream in your face. It whispers. Soft and insidious. It lingers in the small pauses between conversations. In the way her smile didn't quite meet her eyes when I said I loved her. In the way she reached for her phone first thing in the morning before even saying good morning to me. Our home, the place we'd built together, had become a set piece. The kitchen where we used to cook together, now a space for her to scroll through texts she didn't want me to see. The living room, once filled with movie nights and laughter, now a quiet space where she sat on one end of the couch, physically present but emotionally miles away. And me? I became an extra in my own life. I stopped filling in the blanks for her. Where I used to ask about her day, press for details, show interest, I started offering only polite nods, non-committal hums. And she didn't seem to mind. If anything, she seemed relieved. That's when it really hit me. She wasn't trying to convince me anymore. She was just keeping up appearances long enough to maintain the illusion. As long as I didn't challenge her, as long as I stayed in my role, everything was fine. Our marriage had become a carefully choreographed play. And every night, the curtain rose again. She'd ask me how work was. Fine. She'd mention some vague meeting or coworker drama. Interesting. We'd eat dinner in a quiet rhythm that used to be comforting. Now it was mechanical. Forks scraping plates. The occasional clink of a glass. Filler noise to mask the silence growing between us. Even the bedroom wasn't safe. In * Macy had become an afterthought. When it happened, it was out of obligation, not connection. And I felt it. Every time. It's a weird kind of loneliness, lying next to someone who's already left you in every way but physically. But still, I didn't confront her. I watched. And the more I watched, the clearer the picture became. One night, after she'd fallen asleep, I stood at the foot of our bed, looking at her. Wondering how much of her was still Caitlin and how much had been replaced by this version of herself I barely recognized. I realized then that she wasn't afraid of me finding out. She was afraid of disrupting the comfortable lie we were living. Because confrontation meant decisions. And decisions meant consequences. As long as we kept pretending, she didn't have to face any of that. But I did. Every day. I started sleeping in the guest room. At first, I made up excuses. Said I'd been tossing and turning too much, didn't want to wake her. She didn't argue. Didn't even ask if something was wrong. She simply nodded, accepted it, and went on with her script. The physical distance was a reflection of the emotional one that had been there for months. And in that quiet, in that space, I began to reclaim myself. I worked longer hours. Not because I needed to, but because I didn't want to be home. I started hitting the gym again, something I hadn't done since our early years of dating. I met up with old friends, reconnected with people I'd pushed aside in favor of our perfect life. Funny how betrayal sharpens your focus. While she kept spinning her web of half-truths, I was slowly, methodically disentangling myself from the life we'd built. Bit by bit, I stopped participating in the performance. I'd skip dinner with her. Started doing my own grocery runs. Moved more of my clothes into the guest room, rearranged drawers. I wasn't hiding it. But she never commented. Not once. That was the confirmation I didn't want but needed. My silence wasn't just her cover. It had become her permission. Every time I didn't call her out, every time I let her walk out the door with some half-baked excuse, she took it as a green light to keep going. But she was wrong. I wasn't giving her permission. I was preparing my exit. And watching her perform night after night, I realized something else. She wasn't even doing it for me anymore. She was doing it for herself. To maintain the illusion of a life she no longer wanted but couldn't yet let go of. She needed me to stay quiet. To stay still. But I wasn't still. Not really. Inside I was moving. Shifting. Growing. And with every quiet retreat, with every piece of myself I took back, I was setting the stage for a different ending. One where the curtain falls not with a dramatic confrontation but with something far more unsettling for her. Silence. My silence was not her victory. It was my choice. And soon it would be my freedom. The thing they never tell you about betrayal is how quiet it gets. You expect fireworks, screaming matches, doors slamming off hinges. But sometimes the real damage comes in whispers. In silences that stretch out until they suffocate you. I didn't leave Caitlin. Not right away. But I did start leaving in other ways. At first, it was small. Hardly noticeable. I'd skip our morning coffee together. Used to be a ritual. She'd sit on the counter, swinging her legs, telling me her plans for the day while I brewed us both a cup. But one morning I just didn't. I poured myself a mug, grabbed my keys, and left without saying a word. The silence hung in the kitchen like a heavy fog. When I came home that evening, she didn't mention it. Just smiled, asked if I wanted to order in. Business as usual. So I kept going. Next was dinner. We used to eat together every night, no matter how busy we were. It was our thing. But now I started working late. Sometimes I wasn't working at all. I'd park at a diner across town, drink terrible coffee, and watch people who still seemed real. People who laughed without pretending. When I did come home, dinner was already packed up. Wrapped in plastic, sitting in the fridge like a polite afterthought. She'd leave a little sticky note, late night, or hope you're hungry, rare heart, as if that emoji was still enough to cover up the cracks. But neither of us acknowledged what was really happening. It was a slow bleed. I moved into the guest room officially after a few restless nights. She didn't fight me on it. Just accepted it like she was rearranging furniture. My clothes found their way into the spare closet. My watch, my wallet, my books, bit by bit, I pulled them out of the life we shared and into a space that was mine alone. Funny thing is, you'd think she'd notice. You'd think she'd ask questions. She didn't. Not once. In hindsight, I think she preferred it that way. My withdrawal made it easier for her to live her double life. No arguments, no confrontations. Just quiet coexistence. We became polite strangers passing through the same space. Morning. Morning. How was work? Busy. You. Same. And that was it. No follow-ups. No real conversation. Just enough to maintain the illusion of normalcy. But behind every word was a wall. I started noticing how she avoided me too. How she'd linger in the shower just a little longer when she knew I was around. How she'd have to take this call and step outside whenever her phone buzzed. Her absences became background noise. Expected. Accepted. Once I tested it. She said she was going to be late for a team dinner. No mention of who, no specifics. Just vague enough to be safe. I watched her get ready from the guest room doorway. Her reflection in the mirror looked perfect. Hair done, makeup flawless, a dress I hadn't seen in years. She used to wear it on special dates with me. Now it wasn't for me. You look nice, I said, leaning against the doorframe. She smiled, adjusting an earring. Thanks, babe. Gotta make a good impression. And that was it. She left. I didn't ask where. She didn't offer. It was as if we both signed an unspoken contract. Don't ask. Don't tell. But my absence was growing louder. I started spending weekends out. Visiting my brother, catching up with friends. I'd leave early, come back late. Sometimes I wouldn't come back until the next morning. Caitlin never texted to ask where I was. Never called to check in. She didn't want to know. Because knowing would mean admitting the truth. One Sunday, I came back after a night out and found her in the kitchen, sipping coffee, scrolling through her phone like it was any other morning. You're up early, she said, not looking up. Didn't really sleep, I replied, pouring myself a cup. Silence. She didn't ask where I'd been. I didn't offer. And just like that, we went back to pretending. But inside, something was shifting. The weight I'd been carrying, the doubt, the hurt, the betrayal, was getting lighter. Not because it was gone, but because I wasn't holding it for both of us anymore. She had her affair. Now, I had my distance. I started changing things she couldn't ignore. I canceled our shared streaming accounts. Signed up for my own. Removed my name from dinner reservations we'd made weeks in advance. Quiet, deliberate cuts. Little reminders that our we was becoming a me. Even the house started to reflect it. Our photos, once proudly displayed, began to disappear. One by one, frames vanished from the walls, from the shelves. I boxed them up, stored them in the attic. She noticed. Of course, she did. But she never said a word. Because to say something would be to acknowledge the unraveling. I wasn't being cruel. I wasn't trying to hurt her. I was just leaving. Without leaving. Each action was a step away from the life we'd built together. A life she had already abandoned in spirit, if not in body. One night, as we passed each other in the hallway, me heading to the guest room, her coming back from God knows where, I caught her eye. For a brief moment, something flickered there. Regret? Guilt? Maybe just the shock of realizing I was no longer playing my part. But the moment passed. We didn't speak. We didn't have to. Our silence had become its own language. I think that's when she realized I wasn't fighting for us anymore. That I wasn't clinging to the remnants of what we had. And maybe in some twisted way that scared her more than a confrontation would have. Because if I wasn't angry, if I wasn't demanding answers, then it meant I was done. And there's nothing more terrifying than the quiet certainty of someone who's made peace with leaving. But I didn't storm out. I didn't make grand speeches or deliver ultimatums. I simply stopped showing up in the ways that mattered. And that, more than any shouting match, was what broke the facade. Because Caitlin could manage an affair. She could juggle the lies, spin the stories. But what she couldn't handle was my absence. My emotional exit. She wasn't expecting that. Neither was I. But it was happening. And there was no going back.